accessed the podcast of OA. Located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will, the podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lantern Myron Rumsey, the podcast of OA begins now.
Hey, Green Lantern fans. Thanks for joining us for episode number 169 of the podcast of OA. This episode, we have another You Are the Core segment, and Brother Phil and I are going to be talking about Green Lantern Season 2, number 4. I'm your co-host, Myron Rumsey, joined by our good friend, Phil Bova. Phil, it is nearly the end of June.
I know, man. This whole beginning of the year is just, it's like gone. It's like gone.
I think the way the first half has gone, I think at the end of June, we should do Happy New Year, kick automatically into 2021, and reboot.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking, man. It just seems like, I don't know, it just seems like yesterday Clark was born. That was January 24th, and then here we are, man. I'm at the end of June. It's like, and then, you know, what sucks is you don't even know what's going to happen with the school year next year.
No, yeah, they're still trying to figure all that out.
Yeah, they are, and I know our district's still trying hard to figure out what they're going to do, just as much as probably every state in the country. I don't know, man. It's going to be an interesting couple months before we go back. When are you? Or you're still working though?
Yeah, we went back to work a couple weeks ago, and it's been interesting. You know, it was a little difficult getting back and trying to figure out how to space ourselves out because the building I work in is pretty population dense, so we faced over this whole process. But I'm glad to be spending another evening with you and talking some Green Lantern stuff.
Exactly. We got some good stuff to talk about, too.
Yeah, so we do have one bad thing. So why don't we do that first and get it out of the way so we can focus on the positive? Okay. I'm sure Green Lantern fans already know, but if you didn't know, legendary DC Comics writer Denny O'Neil passed away recently. An awful, terrible loss for everybody. Denny was a fantastic writer, a legend in the industry, wrote for Marvel and DC, passed away at the age of 81 in his home. Everybody, of course, knows, Green Lantern fans knows him from partnering with Neil Adams and doing the Hard Traveling Heroes run in Green Lantern. He also had a very notable run with Batman, where Batman was basically revitalized after the 60s TV show, and he and Neil Adams teamed up together and had a fantastic run in Batman. And I'll be honest, as a Green Lantern fan, I still like the Batman run even better. I just love what they did with Batman. But it's interesting. We've got the 80th anniversary 100-page super spectacular coming out next week, and that may very well have the last Denny O'Neil story in it. Yeah,
it's a shame. I know a lot of people, like when that news broke, I mean, there was just a lot of people on Twitter talking about it, even other writers, like Scott Snyder and Liam Sharp, he commented, Grant Morrison, I think, commented something. I mean, a lot of people were rallying behind the sad news, and, it's difficult. And anytime you lose a good writer, especially with somebody like Denny O'Neil, who had a big impact on Green Lantern, it hurts us fans to the core, and it's a passing of an era, a different era that he wrote in. And, it's definitely sad. Yep. Not good news at all.
Denny is, credited with ushering in the Bronze Age. It was that run on Green Lantern with Neil Adams that many people say signifies the start of the Bronze Age. And certainly, it brought a lot of social commentary to comics that maybe wasn't necessarily there in the same way during a very troubled time of our history. So, certainly an amazing career the man had. I don't know if you saw, but Comixology's actually doing a thing with DC Comics, and they're giving away Green Lantern Green Arrow number 76, which was the start of the Hard Traveling Heroes era. They're giving that away for free.
Oh, that's really cool. That's really, really cool.
But
I mean, it's not easy news, and it's always sad to hear about. I mean, anybody passing in general, but like with the comic book fans, we all rally, and a lot of fans are very, very, very central to their core when it comes to their beliefs, and Denny O'Neil was no different, and he drew a lot of fans, and and he was a great, 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 great writer.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. He was one of the creators I had not had a chance to meet yet. So My condolences to his family for certain. While we've lost a comic book creator, they've lost a family member, and certainly that's a tremendous loss for them. So our condolences go out to the O'Neill family and so on. In more positive news, DC Comics, Warner Brothers has announced a partnership with Spotify for a series of DC and other properties scripted podcasts to be on the Spotify platform. They talked about things like, of course, Superman, that was all mentioned. Other Warner Brothers properties such as Supernatural were mentioned as well. So, of course, we wonder, as Green Lantern fans, will we get to see a Green Lantern drama on a podcast on Spotify? I certainly hope so. What do you think?
Well, do you remember those graphic audios that came out years back?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so they had Green Lantern Hero Quest and Green Lantern Sleepers, and those were like scripted narrative books, I guess, audio books, if you will. Kind of like radio serials, though not as cheesy as those old radio serials were, but they had a ton of them. They had like a bunch of Batman ones. They even had Crisis on Infinite Earths. Final Crisis was on there. Infinite Crisis. They had them all.
Yeah, there was a lot of them.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's going to be the same type of things that those graphic audios concentrated on.
Yeah, I really loved those. They were really fantastic, and unfortunately, they must have lost their licensing with Marvel and DC because they no longer have them.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, they were doing a special. They were half price right before they all disappeared, and I scarfed up a couple that I didn't have. But they were really cool. But what limited them was they only adapted things that were turned into actual novels. So unless you had a story that was adapted to a novel, they wouldn't, for example, they wouldn't do Blackest Night because Blackest Night was never translated from the comic book form to a book form.
Gotcha.
Whereas everything else that they did had those novels. And for some reason, somewhere along the way, DC got away from all of that. And I think Marvel did as well. I'm not sure exactly why, but it's sad to see those all go away. Those I thought were fantastic. I like audiobooks every now and then, but just having somebody read them is one thing. This was, as their tagline said, a movie in your mind, because it was sound effects, acting, full voice cast. It was really cool. And what they did is they even tried to keep the same voice actor for the same character if they appeared in other books.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They did, didn't they?
Yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah, those were really cool. I actually went and looked when I heard that news broke. I still have them all. I actually had them all a long time ago when I got them, and I completely forgot about them until I heard about that Spotify deal. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. So I'm going to go back and listen to a few of them and see how they are, revisit them.
It reminds me a little bit, the old Power Records deals where you used to have the album with different tracks on it. I remember them more fondly as the 45 RPM record that came with a mini comic book, and it actually went along with the comic book. So you could, as a young person, read along with the book and listen to the story at the same time with the sound effects and the voice acting. It helped bring the comics alive.
Yep, it did. And they were fun to listen to. If anybody gets a chance to check them out, I'm sure they could they might have a hard time finding them nowadays.
Yeah, there are, particularly the record stuff, you'll find a lot of that stuff. There wasn't really a Green Lantern one. They're kind of sort of, but there were a lot of, I remember in my youth, mainly the Marvel ones, the Spider-Man ones, and Captain America and the Falcon was one of my favorite ones. They were really, really kind of neat, but you might still be able to find those out there. But yeah, I hope these are kind of in that audio drama format. I don't think we're going to see Green Lantern in the near future when these come out. I think they're going to wait until the TV show hits HBO Max, and then it's going to then.
That would make sense.
Kind of like, when the 2011 movie came out, they did the Green Lantern Emerald Knights animated film, and that was actually supposed to kind of be a prequel to the movie. Originally, Hal wasn't supposed to be in that. That was supposed to be narrated by Sinestro, and they had to add Hal at the last minute because when Warner Brothers found out that the lead character from the movie wasn't going to be in the animated film, they basically told, the Warner Brothers Animation to change it.
Well, the one thing about the movie that came out, they also came out with a slew of comic books that were supposed to coordinate with the movie. But I remember distinctly that those things came out after the release of the movie.
Yeah, you're right. The timing was not right.
Yeah.
Do you remember and not a lot of people participated in it. There was an alternate reality game for the movie, and it started with an ad in a Green Lantern comic. And it was actually an alternate reality game where players got to figure out what happened in terms of Abin Sur's ship coming down. And you're interacting with different characters. You're actually, writing them. And there was a lot of, I really can't describe all of it, but there was a social media message board where people were participating in the conversation. And at one point, there was an audio file that was discovered, and it was basically, in the movie, Sinestro is talking to Abin Sur, and he talks about Fantara Rob, just in a brief throwaway line. Well, this was actually Parallax from the movie killing Fantara Rob, who Green Lantern fans may realize is Orishia's father.
Interesting. I don't remember those. I don't remember that.
I have the audio file. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to play it as a bumper between this opening and our next segment. So it won't be your typical audio bumper, but it will have the recording of Fantara Rob in his encounter with Parallax as Fantara Rob is talking to Sinestro. But it was a really cool augmented reality app adventure where gosh, I'm trying to remember the name of how it went, but they actually, like, we were interacting with Amanda Waller, and I remember kind of like threatening her, like I'd figured out who she was, and I was talking about her husband and stuff, and they actually responded. They looked up where I lived in reality and where I worked, and in the emails I got back, it was scary.
Wow, that's really interesting.
It was cool. Not a lot of people participated in it. I don't think a lot of people figured out that the ad in the comic book was actually something real, because it looked like a boring ad for an astronomy group. And it was really cool. But anyway, that was a similar type of an audio thing.
Yeah, it's going to be cool. I hope they do a lot of them. And I hope they really if they signed a deal with Spotify, I would think that they would probably put some type of thought behind it. At least that's wishful thinking, but
you're the hopeful optimist, right?
I mean, I guess I gotta be. But I don't know. Green Lantern's getting a lot of shade, and I hope that they start doing more with him as this series starts to gain momentum. Now, you did see that DC fandom that's starting, right?
Oh yeah, the fandom.
Fandom, that's right, fandom. I have a feeling that when that starts kicking off in August, they might start talking about the Green Lantern series a little bit more.
Yeah, I hope so. Maybe we'll get some kind of a surprise announcement at this fandom event. I certainly hope so. Wishful thinking. I hope we find out the cast, at least the major leads. Who's playing Sinestro and who's playing the other Green Lanterns.
Couldn't agree more.
But yeah, this whole Spotify thing could be really interesting, especially if they do it as a way to tie into the shows. And particularly in case of Green Lantern, they tie into the shows and we get some background material or other stuff, because there's so much history in Green Lantern. There's so much that could be done. Just introducing characters that end up showing up in the show for those that partake of the Spotify stuff to learn more backstory about a character before they show up in the show could be amazing for them.
Yep, I agree. Wishful thinking. I guess only time will tell, like we always say, right?
if we were king, right?
Right. Right, exactly.
Well, I think we've got a good episode lined up here. We've a new issue of Green Lantern to talk about, and I'm excited for this You Are the Core segment. For those of you who have been listening to the show, we've talked a little bit about a 3-part series I did on Green Lantern in music history. And one of the bands that I highlighted in installment 3, the Mitch Laing Band, reached out to me afterwards, after reading the article and stuff, and were excited that I chose their song as my number 2 Green Lantern song of all time, and said, hey, I'd love to be on the show. So I thought, that'd be a great You Are the Core segment, because this guy's a Green Lantern fan, and he wrote a song about Green Lantern that's out there in the world that you can download and listen to.
And not only that, look at all the research you did on that 3-part on that 3-part article you wrote, man. Such a fantastic job. And, it's really flattering for one of those guys to reach out and, agree to be on the show. I mean, it's just fun in its own right.
Absolutely. And since we're talking about stuff like that, I was very humbled on Twitter this last week. Robert Venditti was commenting to the person that does the Hawk World Twitter handle and so on. And he was a little down on himself, and Robert Venditti responded to him and said, keep your chin up. You and Blog of O are great champions for your characters. And I just thought that was very nice of him to remember us, because it's been a number of years since he's written Green Lantern, other than obviously what's going to be in the 80-page super spectacular.
Yeah, I agree. That is really cool of him to do that. I mean, he always responds to my my Twitter whenever I comment or whenever I include him on something, because I know I think he's got a story coming up in the Green Lantern book next week.
Yep.
And I made a mention of it on Twitter, and he responded to it. And he's one of my all-time favorite writers, man. I love his Hawkman has been awesome. But like Green Lantern, he took that character and he turned it on its head, kind of like Jeff Johns really did with Green Lantern back in the day. And Venditti had his own take on it, and he's got his own take on this Hawkman series. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not even that big of a Hawkman fan, but I like Venditti writing it.
I think Robert is a very underrated writer. I think he got a bad rap for the start of his run, and I'll admit I didn't particularly care for that whole Lights Out piece of his run that started his run. Conceptually, I didn't like it, but he had a lot of how shall I put this? He had a lot of editorial interference in the beginning of his run, and if you compare his Rebirth run to his New 52 run, boy, is it a lot different, and the quality is much better in the second half of his run when Rebirth Green Lantern Corps. Much better run, at least in my opinion.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, we're on the same page with that, and I fully agree with that. But like you said, whenever they got an editorial strain on it, there's only so much a writer can and cannot do, especially when you have to live underneath an umbrella like that.
Yeah. And I don't want to comment too much, but I know that when, Rob was on this show probably, I think, a record 5 times during his run, which is amazing. And he said to me some things off mic, which I don't want to betray his trust, and sometimes writers don't get to write the stories they planned. I'll just leave it that way. So as cryptically as I can. So let's take a quick break, and back we've got our You Are the Core segment.
All right, sounds like a plan.
Audio anomaly picked up in the area of disturbance near Cygnus. Classified top secret. The contents and the technology used to record and broadcast this, seemingly from deep space, are presently unverified and suspected to be of alien origin. Any clearance request should be addressed directly to Wall.
This is Fatal! Green Lantern Sector 2815! Emergency message, highest priority! Sinestro, I feel this will reach you in time! We have been attacked by an unknown enemy of great power! My defense is
Look at me, Green Lantern. Your will is free. I see your fear.
All right, well, welcome back to the podcast of OA. This is our favorite segment of the show, You Are the Core. And tonight, Phil and I are joined by Mitch Laing from the Mitch Laing Band. And if you guys remember from the 3-part article I did on Green Lantern and Music History. Mitch and his band did a song just a couple of years ago called In Brightest Day and Darkest Night, which I highly, highly, highly promote as a great song. It's actually, of all the songs that have been recorded, I counted it in my top 5 easily. So Mitch, welcome to the podcast of Oa. We're glad to have you.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It was an honor to be even mentioned on your list.
It's funny because I had stopped looking for songs after the movie came out, and so I was like, well, I'm writing this article. I got to see what else is out there, and I came across your song. I was like, oh, this is so incredibly awesome. I love this song. This is so great. It's got such a great hook.
I was just surprised that anybody found it, to be honest with you.
Myron's a sleuth, man. That guy can find some stuff. His article, I'm telling you what, he pulled bands out from like anywhere, and I was like, oh my gosh, where'd you find these guys at?
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, good stuff.
Whenever I was telling people, I read the article and I was telling folks about it, I was like, yeah, man, we were like number 2. We were like the number 2 best, Green Lantern song of all time. And their response was like, well, out of how many? Like what, 3, right?
There's a lot. I'm surprised how many there are.
Yeah, I was like reading your article and seeing, I was like, man, this is way more than I thought. And I kept on having to like, man, go read the article. There's a very wide variety of bands and songs about the Emerald Guardian.
It was interesting when I was listening to your song for the first time. I felt like you guys were channeling Ukla the Mock. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that band.
No, I'm not.
They were a band from Buffalo, New York, and their music was very similar in style, at least to that one particular track. I loved in the song when you called out Ryan Reynolds. I just thought that was so cheeky.
Well, I've always been the kind of like comic book movie goer that like, I tell you, I'm a real easy mark. It's really easy to get me excited and like to get me to enjoy the superhero show, and especially with Green Lantern, because Green Lantern with like a number of other 5 DC characters have a very special place in my heart. So I really wanted to like the movie, and I just remember like feeling really conflicted the first time I watched it, like leaving the theater. It's like I really wanted to like it, but just like deep down I was just like, no man, that wouldn't do. But I know you want to like it, but that just wasn't good.
And I don't know if you're following Green Lantern these days, but you commented in the song that there were 4. I hate to tell you this, but they're up to 8.
Yeah. See, all right, here's the thing. My comic book knowledge about Green Lantern starts out in the 70s. Back whenever Green Lantern had a little 4-page or 4 to 6-page little thing at the end of Flash comics.
Oh, yeah.
Like for a while, like that's how DC would introduce new characters. Like they introduced Green Lantern. Well, not like introduce Green Lantern, but they brought in the Hal Jordan Green Lantern that way. They brought in Firestorm that way, and like I had a bunch of comics of Flash from the 70s, and so they were just filled with the little 4 to 6 page endings of Green Lantern. So that's where my introduction and love of Green Lantern started, was off of the back of the Flash. And so I kind of kept up with the storyline because, that was the 70s. I wasn't even born back then, but I retroactively collected them. And I kept up all the way up until Kyle Rayner and Ollie's monk son was the new Green Arrow, and they were, stopping Scooby-Doo mysteries together. And that was whenever I was like, okay, all right, let's go check out what Swamp Thing's doing this week.
What they used to do with with Green Lantern was after the Neil Adams and Denny O'Neil run ended, the book was canceled. And so for a while, Hal didn't have a book to be in. And so they made him a backup in The Flash there for a while. And then they relaunched with Denny O'Neil and Mike Grell. Now, did you read any of the Jeff Johns stuff?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because that's what got us the movie. That's a downside, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm a very, very big Swamp Thing fan. I think if I was going to have, I had to point at a DC character and say number one, it's going to be Swamp Thing. I know a piece of that is because I'm a Louisiana boy myself, and Swampy is Louisiana's favorite superhero. So I really, really enjoyed during the Darkest Night run where they brought Swamp Thing in as a freaking White Lantern.
Yeah, that was cool. Did you see the new TV show?
Yeah, I was going to ask that
The
too.
Swamp Thing show?
Yeah.
The Swamp Thing show,
that was
the new
awesome.
one that came out and then got canceled immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Firefly of DC shows.
Yeah. That's exactly the best way to put it.
I mean it's a genius work of art. I mean, as a Swamp Thing fan, they did it right. You could tell they were, interesting the Green, and they were teasing the Rot. They had Anton Arcane tease in the shadows. You got, what's his name? Woodrue coming in at the very end, going full. I remember he was called the Floral
Blue
Man.
Devil? Blue Devil?
Yeah, Blue Devil. I mean, it told the story just so well, and even the romantic part between, Abby, that was always a big draw for the young kids in the 80s comics of Swamp Thing, is you wanted to see the chick making out with the plant while she was in skimpy clothing.
The good old Alan Moore stuff.
I'm actually in the process of rereading the Alan Moore Swamp Thing run. I've got the big stack of them at my feet right now, actually.
Good writing, man. That's good. That was good writing back then. I liked how they put the Phantom Stranger in that series.
Yeah.
I like when he showed it.
They used a lot of characters that didn't get a big run on their own, or didn't necessarily have a major following on their own, but you throw your Constantines and your Etrigans and your stuff like that into Swamp Thing, and it turned out to be some amazing storylines. I think got some heat on some of those other characters for a while.
Yeah, I was pretty pissed when it got canceled. I'm not gonna lie.
And now you hear what CW is doing right now, right?
Aren't they just replaying the first season?
Yeah, it's the stupidest thing I've heard in my freaking life, and I'm doing my best not to curse here, guys. I have a really bad potty mouth, so I'm doing my best to hold it back.
We appreciate that.
Myron's got the beat button. Don't worry.
But they are being so very stupid that not only are they going to show you the same episodes that the fans have already liked, but they're showing it to you edited for TV, so you're not even getting all the cool stuff that you saw whenever you first saw it. And then they're like, oh, and by the way, there's no guarantee. In fact, we're not even saying we're going to do a second season. We're just going to throw this out here, and if the ratings are ridiculous, then yeah, we'll make a second season. Well, why would we want to freaking watch it then?
Especially if it was going to be made for TV.
And if memory serves, the ratings for the original series it did well.
Yeah, I mean, and all of this was because some idiot couldn't file some tax paperwork correctly, and so because of that, they had to shut down in the towards the end of even filming. I want to know who did that. If we find out who does, we're going to make their life living hell.
You sound like me You sound like me when they canceled Green Lantern the animated series.
Go back and listen to that profanity, Mitch.
There was an episode that we recorded.
Go back and listen.
Yeah, the day they canceled Green Lantern the animated series, we recorded an episode, and that's the one episode we have that's completely explicit because it was just a rain of profanity.
We can get it worked up.
So Mitch, the Green Lantern song was part of a whole album called Justice. That was a whole DC kind of a themed album, right?
Correct. Yeah. Once I decided to like branch off and do my own project, I had decided I wrote the Batman song off that album. I wrote that the day after I saw The Dark Knight. And I saw Dark Knight on the opening Thursday at midnight type thing, like I spent 2 months before the release of that movie, like watching all the old Keaton films, the Schumacher films, all the Bruce Timm cartoons, even the Justice League, anything that had Conroy doing the voice, rewatched it, reread all of my Batman comics and graphic novels that I had, all this leading up to go see The Dark Knight, went and saw it, came back, wrote the Batman song pretty much in one fell swoop once I sat down and, had a few beers and such. But that's what kind of started it. That was in 2008, so that was a long time ago. And throughout the years, I would just kind of write another superhero song, and it just because DC is my favorite comic book outlet of the two. I mean, we can't argue that Marvel gives us the best movies and they give us the best TV shows that tell a complete story. We can't even compete with them on that. But as far as comic book story goes, I always love DC more. And I noticed a pattern. All the songs that I was writing were all DC comic books. So I was like, all right, well, once you see a pattern arise, why don't you just lean into the pattern and focus on that? And next thing you know, I had a whole album's worth of stuff. And once I decided to do a solo project, I was like, well, I really have always wanted to do this superhero album. No one's really been interested in writing, recording these songs every time I've ever brought them up. No one wants to dress in costumes like I want to do. Since it's just me, I'm going to go ahead and do that.
Now, was this the first superhero album you did? Because I know you did an Avengers one too, called Avenge.
Yes, and in fact, Justice was the first one. And whenever I did Justice, I had mention of doing a Marvel album. To be honest with you, that came purely from fan shows.
Gotcha.
We'd get people at the merch table all the time, like, so when are you going to do the Marvel album? And I'm like, well, we just did the superhero album. Like, I had other plans. I was going to do the Naruto album after that. And then we had a horror movie album and a Saturday morning cartoons that we had like other themed album plans, like already mapped out. We just, had to actually write the material. And people were just like, you got to do a Marvel album. You got to do a Marvel album. Finally, I was like, well, all right, fine. Twist my arm. And the funny thing is even though I think the Marvel album is like industry standard wise recorded at a much higher quality, the Justice album still is just killing it in like sales and downloads.
And you mentioned the Naruto album, which that just came out a few months ago, right?
Yeah. It came out, we all know that COVID-19 kicked everybody in the... I mean, whenever COVID happened, we literally had just released the album and we had a 3-date opening slot for freaking Green Jelly booked. and we had another little 5-day run with a bunch of great bands from all around the South, kind of like a underground Warped Tour that we had been working on planning, us and like 6 other bands. And then like all this was gearing up. It was like, in 2 weeks, next thing you know, everything shut down.
Quickly too.
So yeah, the Naruto album is called Hokage, and it literally dropped a week before everything got shut down.
So on your album cover, Mitch, I see that you got a guy playing a tentacle for a guitar. Looks like Aquaman.
Yeah.
And then it looks like which one of these guys on here is you?
The Flash.
Oh, I see it down there. Okay, gotcha. That's cool.
I mean,
that's almost like a drawback to Starro. Remember that, Myron? Starro?
Yeah, kinda.
Yeah, a little bit.
I'm glad you said that, because that's exactly what we were nodding to with that album cover.
Great.
Boom.
In fact, whenever I was pitching the idea to the graphic design dude, I literally gave him that album cover, and I was like, I want to do this. And he was like, well, you're going to get sued, right? And I'm like, well, I mean, I'm already walking a tight line on all this anyway, And he's like, well, can we not give them as much ammo? I'm like, all right. What do you suggest? And he's like, instead of making it the Star Alien, just make it a giant octopus. So that way you don't have to copy it exactly, and you can have people doing different things, and it's just slightly different.
It's cool. It's a cool cover, man. I love it. I even like your banner. The banner's awesome. That's a whole throwback to the Justice League stuff. That's cool, man.
Well, thank you. Have you had a chance to check out some of the tracks from it?
Oh yeah. The Fastest Man Alive was cool. The King of the Sea was awesome. I like that too. I like how you got everybody on there. The Ode to Princess Diana and the Swamp Thing Boogie.
I was, the Swamp Thing Boogie song. One thing I was really happy about doing, and I'm glad that I haven't been caught yet, or at least called out because the show got canceled, was you noticed that I dropped the intro from the original 1989 Swamp Thing show in there as the third verse.
Yeah, I thought that was cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
I still watch those. I have all 3 seasons still.
It's good stuff.
So back to Green Lantern. What about Green Lantern did you get interested in? What made Lantern?
Well, I mean, the main thing was like this dude's power was based off of his imagination. Like at the end of the day, he was only limited by what he could create and think of. And I think that's why Kyle Rayner was such a popular Green Lantern for a while, is because like his constructs were some of the most creative and fun constructs that I think any of the Lanterns had. I mean, Hal was inventive too. I mean, John Stewart was pretty much straight to business. Guy was, a perv. And then you had, Kyle with the amazing imagination, the cartoonist. And so I think that was the main thing that drove me to them, was like, man, this dude's power is based off of his imagination. And I had a fantastic imagination as a kid, and I kind of feel like I still do. And so the power of imagination was really like drawing to me.
Seems to be what everybody usually goes towards when it comes to Green Lantern, is his ability to use his willpower and to see beyond things to form these constructs, and every Lantern's different when it comes to that regard. John Stewart's considerably different, as is Kyle Rayner, as is Guy Gardner, and as is Hal Jordan. And they all bring their own separate, unique form to these constructs that they're thinking of. And a lot of the fans that we talk to, myself included, and Myron, I'm sure you'd agree, that's one of the biggest draws to the character itself, is the limits of their imagination to perform those duties,
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So Mitch, I know in the song you kind of poke some fun at Guy Gardner. Do you have any Guy Gardner fans at your shows that take exception to that at all?
Actually, yes. There was this guy. I hope he's listening. In Portland, Oregon now. His name's Chris Thibodeau, and he was somebody that like I had known. In the town where we grew up, Monroe. It's not like a small town, but it's small enough that you kind of get a scope of who all's here, And so he's somebody that I've known since I was like a kid, just in passing from, school and such. And he just happened to also work in the engineering at the TV station that I did. And I was letting them know, like, hey, man, they like comic books. And, I know he was a Green Lantern fan because he had his own little, those little printers that he printed out his own rings and stuff, So I saw him like, wearing that. I was like, hey, man, come check out the show. We got a Green Lantern song. He was like, I'm very interested in hearing about that. And he came to the show, and, he was enjoying the music and everything. He played the Green Lantern song. And I noticed at one point in time, like, the smile leaves his face. And I'm like, okay, that's a bummer. All right, maybe he didn't like something. Maybe we messed up. I don't know. We got done playing the show, and he's talking to me afterwards, and he's like, the only thing he said, he walked was like, yeah, Guy Gardner is my favorite Lantern, by the way. And I'm like, oh. He was a good sport because the next day he actually brought me he printed out my own ring, like the own Green Lantern ring. I was like, here you go, bud. I mean, I was just messing with you, no hard feelings. I mean, I guess, I can see your point about Guy. We ended up having like a 45-minute debate about Guy after that. And after the end of the debate, he was like, I see, man, but, it's still a cool song. I'm like, all right, cool.
That's great.
That's awesome. So, Mitch, what era of Green Lantern comics would you say interests you the most? I know you mentioned Kyle Rayner and Hal Jordan. Which one would you prefer? Like, which one did you go? Which one did you yourself, I guess for lack of a better words, adhere to when you first started reading the book?
Hal.
Hal.
And I had the first issue of his run from 1980 whenever it came out, and he was like, struggling being a vagabond and, drinking. And like, I remember Batman shows up over at Guy's place to look for him because he was like, yeah, Hal's taking a bad turn. I figured he might show up here. I'm like, damn, Batman, you're just like throwing shade at Guy.
It's because Batman's a jerk.
So we got time for about one more question. A lot of comic fans have collections, comics, toys, all that kind of stuff. Do you have a favorite item, whether it's a comic book issue or a collectible item in your collection?
Say favorite comic book or toy. I mean, I've had a lot of people like give me, I've had people give me like the Kurama Nine-Tailed Fox Avatar. I've had people give me, the Atom from CW. I guess it'd be stuff like that friends and fans given me at shows and or just later on because of the shows and stuff like that. So it's tough for me to pick a favorite, but if I was going, it would be from that stack of things that people have given me, showing like, hey, I really enjoyed your song and made me think of this. So here, like that to me is one of the biggest like honors you can get as an underground, working hungry musician.
That's cool.
Very cool.
That is cool. Well, Mitch, we appreciate you taking some time out of your night and giving us a half an hour of your life that you'll never get back. But we love the song. I appreciate you giving us your time. I wish the best of luck to you and your band.
Say again?
I said I wish you and your band the best of luck as you continue your endeavors, and hopefully you can start doing some gigs again pretty soon.
Oh yeah, hopefully so. Thanks, and yeah, we're gonna be pushing the Hokage album for the next, I guess, year and a half. So anybody that comes and sees us will be decked out in the Naruto cosplay garbs.
Cool. So where do you guys usually play? Just so in case we have listeners all over the country, so they can look out for you. Where should they be looking?
Well, we just signed with a major management company. Before we were pretty much kind of restrained to a 6-hour drive from Monroe, Louisiana. So like your Dallas, Texas, your Little Rock, Austin, Texas, New Orleans, of course, Shreveport, Birmingham, Memphis, places like that. That was a quick, day-night drive, but now that we've signed with the management company, we're hoping that we can jump on some opening slots for some nice mid-range bands here in the future.
Very cool.
That's
all right,
awesome, Mitch.
we look forward to hearing more from you guys.
Call anytime.
So Ryan Reynolds, you are no lantern of mine, no sequels, because you're bombing your lines, and green Hot Wheels aren't cool at all, and Nathan Fillion would have rocked them all. As a Green Lantern, the greatest hero in the Lantern Corps, he's a Green Lantern, protecting Sector 2814, he's a Green Lantern. Sinestro has no chance anymore, he's a Green Lantern. Trouble, you're ringing with your will, you will soar.
All right, well, Phil, it seems like it's been forever since we've had a new Green Lantern book, but this week we got Green Lantern Season 2, Issue number 4. So we're about a third of the way through this second season with Grant Morrison and Liam Sharp. And this one's got a Flash Green Lantern team-up, which, for my money, is the best team-up in comics.
Yeah, I agree. I liked it. I liked seeing Barry and Hal together again.
Yeah, people can have their Batman and Superman World's Finest. I'll take the Brave and the Bold with Barry and Hal any day of the week.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree.
This one had some interesting callbacks. I mean, we know that every time Grant Morrison does one of these issues, there's basically callbacks to DC history, and this one is no exception. Outside of obviously Barry and Hal being the best of friends, this time we see the return of Olivia Reynolds, who is someone we have not seen since Emerald Twilight, right before Emerald Twilight. The last time I think she appeared was the issue right before, in issue number 47. And she was Hal's girlfriend, but also toy salesman rival. Yes, you heard me, toy salesman rival. She had abilities of her own. She had what's called the U-Mind, which is basically kind of, they riff on it being kind of like almost similar to the anti-life equation kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
compartmentalized. It seems like it's some kind of compartmentalized. I guess no, I'd rather say I likened it to being inside of the Green Lantern ring, but instead going inside of her mind.
Yeah, kind of. And what's interesting is that that's also related to Aaliyah Strange, the daughter of Adam Strange, who we've seen in the pages of the series so far in the back in the first season.
Yeah.
So interesting stuff there. Interesting to see her there. She looks a little different here than she did the last time we saw her, but interesting that they pulled that into the mix. And then the Golden Giants that we see in this one, this goes back to, it was the Flash issue number 120, from 1961. It's a John Broome, Carmine Infantino, Joe Giella, masterpiece, for lack of a better term, but it's got Barry and Wally as Kid Flash dealing with these Golden Giants, basically previous in our timeline, which is where that whole Golden Giants of the Neo Pangea on the cover comes from. So they're kind of part of that whole thing. How they tie into this is interesting. But the interesting reference that got me here was when they referred to Zundernau, which if you remember back issue 11 of the first season, when the Guardians of the Multiverse, they were dealing with Zundernau, who was this giant golden person that was on Earth 15. And I don't remember that issue, Phil.
I do.
So same species, which I thought was very, very interesting. Again, a callback to this series, tying it all back together, which I thought was kind of cool. The reference to Lenglands when they're talking about Olivia Reynolds, that also ties back to the previous stories with her. So cool stuff there to see that stuff all pulled together. I thought it was funny to see Barry and Hal refer to each other as Bartholomew and Harold. That was humorous.
Yeah, that was cool. Hey, and did you also get a sense that it's funny because the Flash, when he's in this, and they're dealing with this the Giants or whatnot, and you get the sense that the Flash has been there before, and like not a lot of time has passed. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It was definitely kind of interesting. And it looked like these golden giants that maybe he and Wally encountered before, or maybe the first time that these aliens were on Earth. And this is just basically a refutation of that. I don't know about you, but the one thing that really threw me off, a couple things threw me off in this issue, but the opening page looks like Hal's back in prehistoric time, and then suddenly he's in modern time, and I have no idea what was happening there. Did you have any idea what was going on? Was that just like a flashback or something?
I don't know, because you see those looks like pterodactyls on that front page, and then the next one they're in a museum.
Yeah, they're in the Flash Museum, and I'm like, what happened there?
If you look closely on the first page, he's laying down that footprint.
Yeah.
And then if you go to the next page, there's a footprint right there in front of him in the museum.
Yeah. I thought it was totally strange to me why they happen. And of course, you see the Clark Kent looking gentleman in the foreground of that title page.
Yeah, it looks just like Kent.
Yeah. And as we find out later on, that's Hyperman.
Yeah.
Which is also a callback. We saw Hyperman back in issue 9 of this series when he was there with there are, of course, avatars for Superman from an old man story that we talked about that previously. So it's interesting to see that, and that's, of course, foreshadowing to what happens later. The other thing that threw me off a little bit, now they get pulled through this portal, and they're fighting these creatures. Hal fights these, as his ring dubs it, technodactyls, and Olivia and Barry are on the planet. A couple things. I had a hard time with the alien language. Sometimes I could understand it. Sometimes I was just scratching my head, and it took me out of the story, because trying to just enjoy the story, and it took me out of it.
I agree. That narrative was a little tough to follow. Well, you got 3 narratives going on. You got your regular English, and then you got whatever this language is that they're speaking, and then you got that meter in the background that's constantly repeating that rhyme that's happening.
Yeah, that was throwing me off too. I'm trying to figure out the purpose, and maybe it's something that we'll find out later. But it reminded me a little bit of Merwidden.
Oh yeah. That's a good observation. Yeah, I didn't think about that.
And I don't know if it is on purpose or not. And Liam Sharp had to have had fun. This is like a 70s mushroom trip.
That page with Quang on it, where he's standing in front of all those creatures, man. I mean, I would have liked to have been sitting with Liam Sharp while he's hanging out and drawing this, and just looking at it while he's drawing it, and just be like, okay, where'd that come from? Did that come from your mind? Did you just have an idea, or are you just drawing these creatures just because? I mean, you got this dog with a looks like a nurse's hat on. There's just random characters in here. This Nutcracker dude with a frog on his head with a wheel.
Yeah, it's just some weird psychedelic stuff. I'm sure he had fun with it, but I was just having a real hard time. So not so much with the graphics and the artwork. I thought that was just beautifully and wonderfully imaginative. but I was struggling a little bit with some of the other things. And I want to ask you two other questions to see if you got something different than I did. But
Okay.
Hal, at one point, you see Hal's mind splinter, quite figuratively and imaginatively. And Hal then says, okay, I'll come quietly. Take me to your leader. And the next thing you know, he shows up next to Barry, and we have no idea what happened.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Because that's when he's trying to tell Barry to pull himself together.
Yeah. I don't understand. I thought I was missing something. And that was throwing me off a little bit. And then they start talking about 3 tests. I'm looking back through this book, and I'm like, where did they mention 3 tests?
I didn't pick up on that either. That's a good point, too.
They mentioned it a couple times. Both Barry and Hal mentioned 3 tests. And I get that they were play testing the humans, but I don't understand where they got this understanding that there were 3 tests. Totally, when I have to stop, I'm like, I didn't hear this before, and I got to go back and look through the book. It really pulled me out of the story, and I don't know what, I enjoyed it, but I struggled with it.
That's a good way to put it, because I was the same way. It was a little jarring. I actually read it twice. The first time I read it just because I was like, oh my God, I started flipping through it when I was at my comic book store, and because it just came out on that Wednesday, and I was like, well, I'm not going to get it digitally. I'm just going to pick it up. So I was flipping through it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Just the artwork, Liam Sharp. I mean, you can't say anything more than we've already said about the king that is Liam Sharp. And each book, it's like clockwork with that man. I mean, every book that comes out, he outdoes himself, and this one is no different. And just some of the things that he puts on these pages and stuff, and what he fills these panels with, man. It's just he's just overindulgent when it comes to his drawing, and man, it just makes it beautiful. And then I went back and read it the second time. And that's when I was having trouble with the alien jargon. I was like, oh God, I can't follow what they're saying. Some of these words don't make any damn sense. It's like, I'll figure it out along the way, I guess. But the one thing that I was curious about is at the very beginning, when Hal meets up with Olivia Reynolds, how come her hair is blonde and then it switches to red?
Well, that was an odd thing. And her hair originally was more red. So I don't know if that's just lighting, because there's some kind of orange highlights there in the beginning. Maybe it's lighting. I don't know.
Or it could be. I also saw that they went through some portal. I don't know what it was. Remember when she got grabbed by that hand and went through that portal?
Yep.
So maybe that was it. I don't know. That was one thing that I was kind of confused about, because her hair looks a little different when she goes through the other side.
Yeah.
Of course, it is. No.
Yeah, I mean, she got caught up in the whirlwind there, and her hair got undone.
That could be.
That could be part of it. But I love the visual, and it's not the first time that we've seen Hal do the cosmic pool ball thing. But yeah. I loved it here too. I loved it the first time I saw it. I mean, I can't remember the issue that it happened in, but he did it once before. But I love that kind of stuff.
Somebody posted that on Twitter.
Did they?
Yeah, I wish I knew who it was. But they posted a picture of this because it was before this issue came out, or it was that morning, I think. And right next to it, they posted a picture of the original comic book, and he says, "And it said, 'Where have I seen this before?'"
Gotcha.
One thing cool that I liked about what he wrote on here is when the Ring is talking to Hal, and it says, "New battery rules, no limit to the scale of a construct, aside from strength of will." That is, I was like, "That's awesome."
So, obviously, the one of the big questions is who's the narrator? Is the narrator that creature at the end that says Long Quing? And by the way, Quing, if you go to Urban Dictionary, there is a meaning for it. It's basically stands for a transgendered, naturally gendered monarch.
Oh, very cool.
Interesting. So I don't know whether that person was the narrator. No. But, you get to the end, and what ties it all back to this ongoing story is at the end when Hal is ambushed by Hyperman, Hyperwoman, and Hyperdog.
Yep. And it's funny because that leads up because Flash runs off. He's got other things to take care of.
He tries
and
to.
then you're kind of left, yeah. And you're kind of left to believe, okay, well, it seems like this issue is going to end on a non-climatic point. But no, it's really cool how the Ring says behind you more than one.
Yeah. And Olivia Reynolds, they did the same thing to her this time than they did before. They basically wiped her memory clean a lot, basically kind of stuffed that into a pocket in her brain where she couldn't remember the fact that she had this power because it is so full.
Yeah, I have a feeling that that's going to come back to bite sometime.
It very well could. I mean, again, we're talking Grant Morrison. He likes to play around with things. I mean, when we saw Zundernell back in Green Lantern 11, I didn't think we'd see him again. I thought he was an interesting character, and here we kind of see more of where that comes from, which is neat. I love that kind of sense of history and continuity. But I artistically, I thought this book was really kind of neat. I struggled a little bit with the narrative, and a lot of it's just because of some of the disjointedness where, like I said, the Hal showing out of nowhere and the 3 test thing and just the whole language of the aliens. What was the point of making it so hard to follow? I don't know. Will we find out later? I don't know, but it shouldn't take away from your enjoyment of an issue. Yeah,
I agree. It was strong, but I'm the same. I agree with you. The narrative was a little wonky. But I've gotten to the point now with Grant Morrison that I don't expect anything, and all his stuff is unexpected. And every time I go to amp myself up to read one of these books, it's almost like I have to say, okay, I can read all of my comics, but I have to make sure that I set time aside, an extra hour, for Green Lantern, just so I can run through Grant Morrison's mind just to catch up with where he's at, man. I mean, this guy. And I just love when he pulls stuff out of the past, and I even posted something on Twitter about Olivia and stuff, and I was like, man, that came out of nowhere. 'Cause that was the first thing I caught when they showed Olivia Reynolds. I was like, wow, geez, I haven't seen that character in quite some time. It's pretty cool that she's back, but of course, it's not like Cowgirl, she comes along and then she's gone.
Right. Well, and the thing is some people are critical of stuff like that. But I look at it as there's enough context clues here that you get what you need to know. So for somebody that isn't familiar with Olivia Reynolds, you're not suffering your reading experience because you don't know the history. But if you do know the history, it makes it all the cooler.
It does. It's kind of like one of those, that's where I remember her. But Grant does that, and that's how he kind of pulls you into these books. You're like you know your past history of Green Lantern more than I do. And you pick up on more stuff than I ever could. But the stuff that I do pick up on, it's like this light goes off in my head. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, very cool. Oh, okay, yeah, very cool. And thank you, Grant Morrison, for once again making us run the gambit of your mind, Jeez.
Well, and that's partially one of the reasons why I like talking about it with you, Phil, because we pick out different things. And that makes it to me more interesting. There are things that you'll find that I don't see, and it adds to my reading enjoyment. And I'm sure the converse. Well, it's one of the things I love about this show.
Absolutely agree. Hey, on a side note, it's kind of cool. When I picked up the hard copy, seeing the ads in here for being isolated, stronger together by staying apart.
Right. Well, of course it was Batman too. So.
Well, they had a Superman one in there in the Fortress of Solitude.
Oh, did they? I missed that one.
Yeah, stronger together, staying apart. Be like Superman.
Yep, there you go.
And it's Christopher Reeves, nonetheless.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, very cool. Good issue, though. Man, I like that issue. I like the visuals in that issue, and that really got me geared up, man. I want number 5 right now.
Yeah, I want to see what they do with Hyperman and Hyperwoman and the whole family.
Yeah, it's cool.
So, interesting issue. Well, let's take a quick pause, and we'll come back and we'll wrap things up.
All right, fellow Owens, welcome back for your another installment of the Green Lantern Fun Fact. And here we go. This is a good one. Hal Jordan once served in the Korean War. A lot of superheroes have been around so long that they exist on something of a sliding timeline. Characters whose origins rely on events that occurred during World War II, for example, generally require updates so they can credibly still exist in their iconic iteration. Created in 1959, Hal Jordan was a test pilot who initially was a veteran of the Korean War. That aspect of the character was quietly discarded over the years, but it was utilized to dazzling effect in Darwin Cook's brilliant The New Frontier, a graphic novel that reimagined the Justice League's formation at the dawn of the space race. Hal was the book's central character, and his harrowing experiences in the Korean War deeply shaped the cocky, emotional, distant man he became. And a side note to that, if any fans of Green Lantern have not read Darwin Cook's brilliant and beautiful The New Frontier, I highly suggest it. It is well worth the read, and it is really, 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 really well done. And Darwin Cook, may he rest in peace, his art is beautiful. And there you have it, Owens. Another awesome, amazing Green Lantern fun fact. All right, fellow Owens, welcome back. Well, Myron, another spectacular issue of Green Lantern came out with Morrison and Sharp. And I have to say, where I'm at right now with the series, I like season 1 a little bit better at this point where I was at the last time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm not sure where I am with it yet because we're only issues into it, but I guess comparing it to the first season, I really did enjoy the first season. I was expecting, and maybe that's what it is, I had expectations about Hal being back on Earth, and I'm not sure if it's matching what I was hoping I was going to get. And I think there's been a couple of issues like this one that, while the quality of the art is certainly spectacular, the narrative pulled me out a little bit, so I've enjoyed it a little bit less. I think the second issue I have felt the same way. Yeah.
It was strong. I mean, of course, like I said, Liam Sharp, always strong on the artwork. It's going to be curious to see what his next endeavor is going to be after Green Lantern. You get so used to him because this is the only book he's working on, I think. And it's going to be I'd like to see him do a Superman. I'd like to see him draw for Superman. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, that would be kind of neat. I wouldn't mind seeing that. For some reason, whenever I think of him, his artwork, I think sorcery. But I'd like to see him do things that are maybe it's more of what's in his wheelhouse, and I'd like to see him do things that are not as much in his wheelhouse. I don't think are something that he would have ever thought he was going to do, maybe. But I've really enjoyed his artwork. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he's also a wonderful guy.
Yeah, he is. He is really cool. On a side note, fellow Owens, just want to let everybody know, if you head over to Emerald Echo Green Lantern podcast, we had Donnie on ours a little while back. I'm going to be doing a spot on their podcast on Jessica Cruz. They're doing a special on Jessica Cruz, and I'm recording with them tomorrow. So once I know when they have that podcast up, I will let Myron know, and you can put it on the blog, and we can put it out there and tweet it to everybody. And I'm looking forward to it. I know you have your reservations about Jessica, and I know I'm a huge Jessica Cruz fan, and it's going to be flattering to be on there. It's going to be nice to talk to other people about Jessica Cruz and get their viewpoints of the character. As long as we're not talking about Simon. But I'm sure he'll probably come up because obviously he was in the book with her, so I guess I have to suffer some of it.
There's also another Green Lantern podcast out there. Just started up. I think they've had one episode. They're part of another network of podcasts. I think they've only done one episode, but they're going to be the show. Their podcast is going to be dedicated to the HBO show. Now I don't think they've got anything out there, but the first episode said, hey, we're here. I'll find a link to that if I can and post it as well. Not that I want people to not listen to our show, but I like them to listen to as many Green Lantern shows as they can, especially if we're going to have more. I think that's spectacular. The more the merrier. I think we're all one big family, and hopefully we all have different voices and bring something different to the table, and everybody gets something different from each show. I think that's really cool.
And what would be really cool is down the line we all do a big crossover, and include everybody again.
Yeah, that would be really cool. That would be really cool.
Yep.
So next episode, we're not going to do a You Are the Core segment because we have a 100-page book to talk about.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to that. I can't wait to read that. There's going to be so much to talk about in that book.
I am so looking forward to this. I was talking to my local comic shop, and he's covers. I haven't told my wife yet I'm buying all of the dollars each, but...
Yeah, that's $100 man. There's like 10 covers, isn't there?
Something like that, yeah. There's at least 9. Yeah, I know. It's a sickness. It's a disease. I have the first thing you have to do is admit you have a problem, and I have a problem.
Yeah, but I will happily say I'm happy with my problem.
But yeah, I am really looking forward to looking at this book and talking about all the stories that are in it. I hope we it may be an oversized episode because I want to talk about each and every one of the stories in this 100-page spectacular and break them down. So it may be an oversized episode, and that is quite all right with me because my friend, and spending time with you and talking Green Lantern is one of the bright points of my week.
It really is, man. And I like doing the weekly episodes. And, and it doesn't, the thing about it is I was worried a little bit when Clark came along to see what kind of time I was going to be able to devote. But actually it works out really, really well. I mean, he goes to bed, we usually do bath time and stuff around 7. And he's usually got a bottle in his mouth by 20 after 7. And he's usually asleep by 7:30. So,
wow.
Yeah, so he's usually in bed, and we got everything tamed down, and shut down for the day, and then I come in here and I get to record with you, and it's like that's like you said, man, it's the highlight of the week, other than New Comic Book Day, and I would look forward to every episode, and I look forward to recording with you each week that comes along, and these segments that we've had with You Are the Core, it's been awesome. It was a fantastic idea by you, and I've enjoyed every single one of them, and all the guys that have been on here have been great. The one thing I'm sad about is I wish we get more females. Yeah. I know we had one, but I'd like to get more female readers involved, and I just don't know how to do that. I guess, hey, female readers, reach out. Get a hold of us.
Well, it's hard because you end up looking a little creepy sometimes and cringeworthy, and I certainly don't want that. I want somebody to feel welcome to the show, but I don't want it to necessarily be a boys' clubhouse, but it's hard. It seems hard to find female fans who want to engage in a more active role. Sadly, I mean, time I did a Google Hangout for Green Lantern, the animated series after it ended, and I had a couple of female fans who wanted to participate, but they didn't want to be seen because they were just so afraid that somebody was going to dox them or harass them in some way. And I just think that's a sad in general. And I if there's any female fans out there who listen to the show who would like to be on the show, we don't have to use your name when you talk. We ask every person who's on the You Are the Core segment how you want to be referred. So if you want to have a pseudonym, certainly welcome to. But we'd love to hear from more people out there. Reach out to us and be a part of the show.
And to better that, any female listener that we do have, fellow Owens, just call yourself Carol Ferris. Nobody can argue with that.
There you go. All right, my friend. Well, next week is going to be a big week. I'm really looking forward to it. Well, last thing I want to say, though, before I sign off is this Sunday is Father's Day. And I want to wish everybody out there who's listening who is a father the most wonderful Father's Day you can possibly have. And if you are a son or daughter and your father is still alive, make sure you tell them what they mean to you. As somebody who has not had a father for 16 years now, I miss having, even though my father and I didn't have a great relationship, I miss not having him in my life. And please take the time out of your day to tell that person how important they are to you before they aren't in yours. And I don't mean to be preachy, but I'm giving you some elderly person's advice.
It's good, strong advice, man. My father and I, we have a great relationship, and I'm looking forward to seeing him, and me being a second-time father, it's interesting. And I will take my moment to shout out to my other son, Gabriel. He's 18. He left on Wednesday for the Navy, so he's now officially under a 2-week quarantine before he starts boot camp.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
so
it's certainly not your first Father's Day, but it's Clark's first Father's Day, and so I wish you the best Father's Day you can possibly have.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I'll send you some photos.
Cool.
You can put them up on the blog if you want.
That's cool. And to my son Ryan, if he's out there listening to this, I doubt it, but if he is listening to it, I hope you know I love you, and talking to you soon. So until next time, my friends, please keep your power ring charged. Make sure you be good to each other. Right now, I think we need that more than anything in the world, and make every day your brightest day.
Exactly. And we'll see you here next week.
The Podcast of OA is the official podcast of the blog of OA and a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Share your comments and questions by calling the show's voicemail line at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. You can send your emails to podcast@blogofoa.com. You can also find the Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA on Twitter and Facebook. Green Lantern and other related characters are the copyrighted property of DC Comics Incorporated and are used without permission. The Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA are fan productions and do not claim any ownership over the Green Lantern or any other copyrighted property.